And feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and use the Q&A function. We'll try to answer as the webinar progresses. And like I said, this is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel.
We'll give it just a moment because we see the number is still climbing, and then we'll get going. I love seeing this representation from all over the state.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, the numbers are still going up, so we'll give it just one more moment. But this is being recorded and will be available to everybody afterwards. Wow, got representation from a lot of areas. Fabulous.
That's awesome.
It's good to see everybody coming in. Feel free to use the chat function to talk amongst yourselves, and we've got the Q&A function if you want to ask questions. We won't be doing raised hands at this point. But it is being recorded. It will be available to you, and we'll get going in just a moment once the numbers stop climbing quickly. Okay, they're still going up. Give it just another moment. This is a lot bigger than the other classes we do together, Emerson.
Yeah, this is my first time actually. We're at 521 now, 522. I usually just have like maybe 30 or 60 students in some classes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of people need help with the pruning, so myself included, so yeah.
Well, the numbers are getting slower, so let's go ahead and maybe get started. Welcome to Pruning 101. If you could change the second slide. I'm Anne-Marie Benz. I'm the Horticulture Programs Manager for California Native Plant Society. We also have with us Maya Argamon, the Horticulture Programs Coordinator, and Emerson Funes will be our teacher for this evening on pruning for native plants. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, to introduce yourself, and to talk amongst yourselves on the chat function. Maya, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so thanks for that introduction. I'm really excited to hear from Emerson about this topic of pruning. So, once you have an established native garden, maintenance is really key to, achieve long-term sustainability in your space. And so in this webinar, we're going to focus on pruning as a part of maintenance. And to me, pruning is both a science and an art. And with careful consideration, you can really prune your plants to not only encourage more space for growth and health, but you can also improve their appearance and achieve, the aesthetic beauty that you're looking for in your space. So pruning is really both a science and an art. And just as a reminder, native plants generally require less maintenance than their non-native counterparts, which includes less water, little or no fertilizer at all, less pruning generally, and less of your time. So not only that, they attract all sorts of wildlife and really represent the beauty of California's natural habitat. So without further ado, Emerson, take it away.
Oh, you're muted.
Oops. Sorry. Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, California Native Plant Society, for having me this evening. I'm Emerson Funes. I work at the Gottlieb Native Garden. Have been there since I was 8 years old. I'm also a teacher at Theodore Payne Foundation for the landscape for the landscape program. It's actually my first time teaching a English course, so this is gonna be fun. English is my second language, so if by any chance and during this lecture you guys don't understand anything or want to clarify something that I said that you guys might not understand, you guys can ask me questions at the end of the lecture. Let's go here. Okay, so this evening we're gonna talk about pruning. Pruning is very important for our garden, especially if you have organizations like homeowners association and in your community where you live, where they're constantly telling you that your garden might look messy or something like that. With pruning, you can definitely clean up your garden and make it look a little bit nicer. There's multiple reasons why we prune. Like Maya said, pruning becomes very important after your garden is established. Maybe after your third, your fourth year, you're gonna have to start maybe doing a little bit of more pruning. Since your plants are established by that time, there are gonna be maybe some dead parts on your plants that you want to make clear out, or maybe prune some flowers to encourage better growth for the next year. Uh, so we're gonna start here. Why do we prune? We prune to rejuvenate our plants. Sometimes, like I said, after our third or fourth years, when our plants are established, our plants are gonna start looking a little bit maybe sad, I would say. And sometimes when you prune them, you can definitely rejuvenate them. For example, when you prune a baccharis, when you have had a baccharis in your garden for maybe 10 years, it may start looking a little bit sad, but if you do a composite pruning, meaning you prune it all the way down maybe to 6 inches, you can definitely rejuvenate that plant, and in 4 months you're gonna see a lot new growth on that plant. And during this lecture, we're also gonna talk about different types of prunings that you can do. Um, as we know, our native plants are very special, and it's not like conventional gardening where you go and you do the same thing to all the plants. With native plants, every plant needs a specific way of doing things, like specific way of pruning, a specific way of watering. It's more of a specialty that we're doing here with native plants. So it's important to know what each plant wants and how it wants it done, to be able to have a healthy night garden. Another reason why we prune aesthetics, to give it the shape that you want. For example, in a house where I work, there's a little courtyard, and I have some toyons growing along a wall that I have been shaping for about 15 years to give it the aesthetics that I want, the way I want it to grow. Um, and then another reason why we prune will be plant health, to remove all the dead or disease or damaged vegetation, or remove branches or dead vegetation from places where you walk. It's important to keep your pathways clean so that nobody falls and there's an accident there. So these are some of the reasons why we prune. After this rain that we had late December, I've noticed that there was a lot of trees that collapsed. I think it's important to take into consideration there too that sometimes our trees can get a little heavy with all the branches they have. So also pruning some of those branches can reduce the probability of of a tree collapsing on your house or collapsing on your property or collapsing on the street, where later on you lose a tree and it also becomes expensive to sometimes clear it up or fix damages that a tree that collapsed has caused. So lately I've been telling the people that I work with to be careful with their trees. Sometimes, like I said, trees can get a little bit heavy, so it's important cutting some of those branches off to make sure that it's equally balanced and it's not gonna collapse on one side or the other. Um, something very important before we start talking about ways of pruning and what we should do. It's important to have your pruners clean. Hygiene is very important. Hygiene is key. California natives are subject to fungal, viral, and bacterial disease that can be spread by dirty tools. So please make sure you're not part of the problem before you use a tool. Make sure that your tools are clean. Before, for example, if you guys are landscapers and you guys are working in one house and you guys have been pruning with your pruners or your shears in one house, and you guys go to another house to work, make sure that your pruners are clean before you go to the other house to work, so that you don't take any fungal or any viral or bacteria disease to the other house. Or even if you're working in one house and you're pruning one plant, before you go and you start working on another plant, it's important that you clean your pruners. Some people use bleach, some people use vinegar, some people use a torch to burn their pruners or their tools to make sure that they don't have any bacteria before you do a cutting on another plant. So it's important to keep your pruners clean and sharp, so that when you do that cutting on that plant that you're gonna be pruning, you're not gonna pass bacteria to it, and it's important to keep it sharp so that you make a clean cut. When you don't have your tools sharp, your tools might cut, but in a way that it's gonna damage your plants. So hygiene and keeping your tools sharp is very important to keep our gardens healthy. Pruning California natives. As with all pruning, it depends on the species that you are pruning. Every native species, its right time to be has its right time to be pruned. Most natives usually like to be pruned after flowering season. Like I said in the beginning, this is completely different from conventional gardening, where people just went and they mow the lawn, or they um, use the blower to blow and or prune their plants the same way. Our natives are special, and every native has its own way of how it likes to be done, or be clean, or be watered. Um, I know that we're not gonna get to all the plants today, but there are a lot of websites where we can go, where we can type in the name of the plant, and it will tell you exactly how that plant wants to be pruned, or when it wants to be pruned, or how it wants to be maintained. So it's important to take into consideration websites that we have to make sure that we're using the right technique for every plant. Pruning styles. We're gonna talk about a couple pruning styles that we have. For example, the first pruning style that I have here will be deadheading. Here, for example, here we have an Eriogonum ex Blixenium that was deadheaded late winter, early spring, to remove all the dead flowers, to give this plant a cleaner aspect. And deadheading pretty much is when the flower is pretty much done. You go all the way to where the flower pretty much ends, and you see green there, and you'd make a cut in there. Let me see if I can zoom in to show you guys what I'm talking about. For example, you see the little hand here that I'm moving. you see this this flower here, I would make a cutting all the way down here. That's where the flower pretty much started. And I wouldn't make a cut like in the middle here because you're gonna leave dead dead stems there. So it's important to take your time and make sure that you're pruning these plants correctly, so that next year you're gonna have nice healthy flowers. And after cleaning this plant, this is how the plant should look. You see that on this side over here, you don't have any dead stems or any flowers left. There are some people that like throwing away the flowers after they prune them. What I do is I usually just throw them in the soil, throw them in the ground, because this is pretty much just adding carbon to your soil. That becomes soil at the end of the day. So I wouldn't get rid of these. I wouldn't throw them away. I just throw them in the ground and leave them there, and they just mix up with the soil. And that's pretty much what I do with this. So this is deadheading. You can do this type of pruning with most buckwheats. I've done it to Eriogonum gigantea. I have done it to salvias. Um, a lot of the natives that have like flowers, like we see here, you can just deadhead it and cut where the flower pretty much starts, like I said in the beginning. Here we have edging. Here we have a Spinosa's Yankee Point. This ground cover was pruned at the edge of the walkway. This helps your walkways pretty much stay safe to walk and give it a neat appearance. This pruning style can be done anytime you need to remove your plant material from your walkway. There are some people that are gonna wanna use maybe electrical tools, or they're gonna wanna use some other type of like shears to do this type of pruning. I'm not saying you can't use those type of prunings, but I personally don't like using those type of tools, because I've noticed that I make a lot of, when you use those type of those type of tools, you leave a lot of like dead heads on your plants. And it doesn't look good in appearance. And also I feel that with those type of tools, you damage your plants. So I pretty much like using hand pruners. Later on in this presentation, I'm gonna show you a couple tools that I like using, tools that I feel that are most convenient to use when cleaning these type of plants. So keeping your walkways clean is very important, so that nobody has an accident. I know that here you see that these have flowers already. This Yankee Point has flowers. But I wouldn't mess with the flowers here. I would just make sure that the walkway is clean. You can pretty much do that any time of the year, whenever you need to do it. Thinning and lifting, it's something very important. Sometimes we have a lot of plants growing in one area, and air circulation and sun penetration can be very poor. So thinning and lifting comes in handy, because you're gonna pretty much thin your plant out, especially if you have like dead areas like you see here on this Gambilia speciosa boca roja. You can definitely go all the way back, maybe even to the trunk of the plant, or wherever the dead part of the plant comes in, and you can just prune it. And this will allow for better air circulation and better sun penetration. And this type of pruning you can do on Cienosas, you can do on Mancinitas. I have even done this on some Salvias. So this is another pruning style, thinning and lifting. Here I have on the slide, helps open the structure of the plant for air circulation, helps us create the desired shape, and helps us remove dead material for aesthetics and fire safety. Pinching is another pruning style that I have actually started doing lately. Whenever you have plants that are growing very leggy and not full from the inside, you can prune whenever this plant is flowering. or about to flower, or even after flowering, you can come in and pinch the flower and remove the flower, and this will allow all the energy of the plant to focus on more growth in the inside. For example, I had a Cianosa's Ray Hartman, one of the places where I work, that was growing very leggy. It was looking, I didn't like how it looked. There was a few leaves on one side of the plant, and it was just like skinny branches going everywhere. And to make this plant have fuller growth inside of it, I decided to pinch the flowers when the flowers were coming out, because the plant is spending a lot of energy on the flowers. Therefore, it doesn't have a lot of energy to grow more fuller growth inside. So when you pinch the flower, the energy is going to focus more on the roots and on the plant. So then you're going to have fuller growth inside of the plants. So pinching is considered another pruning style. Here on the slides, I have removal of only stem tips when new growth is arriving at or just after flowering. This encourages fuller growth on your plants. And you can do these on salvias, on Mancinitas, Cianosas, on pretty much on any plant that you have growing that's growing very leggy and not full inside. Coppicing is another pruning style that a lot of our natives can take. Cutting woody plants into the ground or within 6 inches of the soil. It revitalizes older plants and produces an abundance of vertical shoots, mimicking the effects of a fire or landslide on regrowth in our plants. The backgrounds we have here on the screen pretty much was coppiced, and 4 months after, it looked like this. So when you're coppicing, you're pretty much getting rid of the whole plant, just leaving a couple stems, or a couple stems to 6 inches. Sometimes I have even pruned some plants, not leaving them to the ground. And because these plants have a very good root system, they always pop back up. For example, Rubni cultivari or Malitiha papi, you can do this style of pruning once the flower is done. You can do this style of pruning to salvias, to some cianosas, to Sessionaria, epilobium. You can just cut them all. Most of the plants, like I said, that have a very good root system, you can do this coppicing style of pruning, and this pretty much revitalizes or revitalizes your plants. What not to do? I decided to add this slide because in different gardens where I go or give consultations, I have noticed that maybe they have had gardeners that taught that you're supposed to take care of native plants the same way you do with other conventional plants, but that's not true. Very often we make the mistake of planting things that are gonna grow too big in areas where we don't need them to be too big, or they're often maybe being blocked by something else. So then people just come and they just prune them, and to make them smaller so that they can fit the area where you have it. And that's pretty much killing the plant at the end of the day. These people that plant these plants in the wrong way and they're constantly pruning them, you're weakening the plant, you're going to end up killing it. And then here we can see that whoever pruned this plant didn't take their time to prune it, because they made a lot of bad cuttings that after a couple of days, when somebody makes a bad cutting on a plant, after a couple of days, you're gonna see all these dead parts, because they just went and maybe with some shears and they just sheared it up to make it smaller, to reduce it. But this is not the way we do things. And then especially if you're gonna prune it when it's blooming, it's not the right time to be pruning it. So what do we have here? Making excessive cuts. This will cause the plant to weaken Pruning just before flowering, this will result in the loss of flowers. Prune repeatedly for size control will also weaken the plants. So that can become a problem. Here we see a Salvia clevelandia that was planted in the wrong area. Um, Here in this area, you may want to plant a smaller plant that's not gonna grow maybe 6 by 5 because it's just gonna, or 5 by 6 because it's gonna grow too big. And here you can see that these people prune this plant maybe in 10 minutes. They just grab the shears and they just pretty much round it all the way around, and they left a lot of dead parts on the plant. And so it's important to take into consideration that you need to take your time to do the right type of pruning on your plants, to make sure that we don't leave any dead parts on it, and to make sure that we're not weakening the plant. Tools. Okay, this is very important. Um, to me, the hand pruners is the most important tool to have. This, to be honest, I feel that when it comes to cleaning a plant, this is all I need. Um, there are some people, like I said, that maybe they're gonna want to prune this plant and they only want to take 10 minutes to do it, and they're just gonna grab some shears and shear it up all the way around and leave a lot of dead areas on it. But if you take your time with these hand pruners, you can really get in there and make the plant look nice. When I prune, I try to look at the plant how the plant used to look when I first planted. So when I prune, I try to mimic how the plant will look naturally when you're pruning it. Um, this is definitely not natural how the plant grows. This plant grows to the sides here, and this person that pruned this plant pretty much just went and did any type of like pruning on it. um so try to mimic how you think the plant would grow naturally, and then you do that type of pruning and take your time, and instead of rushing things, because then you're just gonna hurt the plants. Hand pruners, like I said, it's very important to have. Make sure that you have your pruners sharp, so that when we're pruning, we're not just um, creating like dead parts on the plants. Sharpen your tools. Make sure that they're clean. Like I said, hygiene is very important. That's why that was the second slide on the presentation today. Here we have hedge shears. If you want to do a hedge, you can definitely use these shears, especially if you have a little bit of time to do it. But I would still use hand pruners instead of using head shears. If my client tells me take your time and do it right, um, with the hand pruners, I can do the same job as with head shears. And I know that with the hand pruners, I'm not gonna leave a lot of dead stems or a lot of dead parts on the plant that I'm pruning. But a head shears could come in handy when you prune a hedge, or that sinuosa that I showed you guys, where I told you guys that it's important to keep the walkway clean. You can also use this head shears. It's important. Loppers, you can use loppers when you have a thicker branch. There are some branches that you won't be able to cut with the head shears, so the loppers could come in handy to cut thicker branches. There are some branches, for example, on on a Cianosa Ray Hartman that I have in one of the houses where I work, that had like branches that were crossed, and I use this tool to cut some of the branches, because sometimes when you have many branches that are crossed in one plant, you can hurt the plant, because once those branches are growing, they're gonna be touching one another, or creating some type of division on the plant. And sometimes when you have a lot of cross branches, it's okay to use one of these loppers, especially if those branches are kind of thick. You can use one of these loppers to cut the branches that are like crossed. I have used this lopper too on a couple palo verdes, Parkinsonia. Some Parkinsonias also have a lot of cross branches that are it's important to make sure that they're not constantly touching each other to have a healthier tree. Long arm pruners is also a good one to use when you have higher branches that you can reach with your hand pruners. This would pretty much reach all the high branches. This is a useful one that I find. The handsaw, it's also another good one. The problem I find with the handsaw is that after you use it a couple of times, it can start becoming, it's not as sharp as when you buy it. So make sure that whenever you use it, it's sharp so that you don't hurt the plant that you're cutting. But this is a good tool to have when you have thicker plants that you cannot prune with the loppers or you cannot prune with your hand shears. This would definitely help you cut thicker branches. Um, some stores also sell the long handsaw. I mean, it's pretty much a handsaw that it's long like the pruners, and this will help you reach branches that are pretty much pretty high. Um, Thicker branches is when this tool becomes more useful. Pruning natives. Now we're gonna talk about three natives that have a specific way of when and how they like being pruned. The first one I have here will be salvia or sages. Reason to prune: health, shape to prevent crown splitting. Yes, this is important. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but some salvias, when they're pretty old, old I mean maybe 15 years or maybe 12 years, um, I've noticed that when they have new flowers on them, sometimes because they're so heavy, they can create a crown splitting. They can just pretty much break from the middle of the big stem, and you're gonna end up losing your plant that way. So sometimes it's important to maybe coppice it a little bit or do some um, more extreme pruning on this plant. So whenever your plant has flowers, you're not gonna have a crown splitting on your plants. Another reason why we prune salvias will be rejuvenation, to encourage rebloom. Um, the pruning season for the salvia will be late fall, early winter. It's the most adequate time when we should prune salvias. And techniques: pinching of the tip, like I said before, if you want to create more fuller growth. If you're noticing your plants that are growing kind of leggy and not enough leaves inside and it's not looking the way you want it to look, you can come and pinch it to allow for more fuller growth in the inside, like we talked about. Deadheading, when the flower is done, you can come and prune all the way back to where you have a new leaf, and next year you should have nice flowers again. A special consideration: ground covers may be hedge or edging. So like I said when I showed you guys the pathway of the cienosas, if you have a ground cover like a bee list salvia and it's growing on your pathway, you can pretty much prune that any time of the year to make sure that you don't have any plant material on the pathway. It's important to keep our pathways clean so that our houses are clean and nobody falls in an accident there. Pruning cyanosas, reason for pruning, aesthetics, to give it the shape you want, giving it the form you desire. Pruning season will be after flowering, so this will be late June, um, late June, early July is the latest that I have pruned cyanosas. And techniques that we can use will be tip pinching to remove old flowers cluster, or like I said, to cause more fuller growth on the inside. Pinching comes in handy with the cyanosas. Like I said, I did this with a couple Ray Hartman cyanosas, and now I have fuller growth inside. Um, and shearing, like we said, and that one picture we saw the walkway. That's you can also do that with this plant. Special considerations on cyanosas: do not cut on a very large branches to avoid fungal infection. Okay, cyanosas, I would recommend that you guys don't do a lot of cuttings on one day on one same plant, because I have noticed that when in the past when I was younger and I didn't know much about this, I would just start pruning acinosas and do excessive pruning, and I've noticed that the plant would weaken, and this also can attract like fungal and other bacteria to your plant. So when you prune acinosas, try to not do a lot of like large prunings on large branches, but also try not to, like if you have a big plant, try to prune it in 2 days. Don't just prune it on one day, because you're really gonna weaken the plant, and it also can attract like fungal bacteria. Try to divide your pruning days into when you're pruning a cyanosa, instead of doing it all on one day, and that can help your plant stay healthy. Pruning Mancinitas. A reason for pruning static to shape and to clean. Um, Mancinitas are very woody, and inside of them, you're gonna find most of the time a lot of like dead little branches here and there. And when the fire department sees these, they get a little paranoid. For example, I know that in Rancho Cucamonga, the fire department, I believe, doesn't allow contractors or people that are doing gardens to plant a lot of manzanitas there, because they think that manzanitas are fire hazard, because it has a lot of wood. You can see a lot of wood on the plant. Um, so manzanitas, you can always keep an eye on them and make sure that you remove all the dead parts in the inside of the plant to so that the fire department doesn't get paranoid um, about this plant, because they think that it's fire hazard. So okay, so we can prune this one for aesthetics, and to keep it clean. Like I said, pruning season for this plant will be early spring before flowers form. So early spring before the flowers form, or early fall after flowering season will be when we want to prune the Mancinitas. Techniques of pruning will be tip pinching. You can also pinch this plant when it's starting to flower, so that you create more fuller growth inside. If you have that leggy problem that I have with some of my plants, and also reduction of plant material if you needed to. Special considerations: prune when hot and dry to limit disease spread. Please do not prune this plant when it's very cold or when it's raining, um, because you're gonna cause this plant to get a disease or bacteria or fungi, and that can become a problem in the future. So always when you prune a manzanita, make sure that it's hot and dry, um, to limit the disease spread. That's something important to take into consideration. Annual pruning of trees. Like I said in the beginning, when it rains, the soil becomes very wet and moist, and any little wind, if your tree is very heavy, any little wind can come and make your tree collapse. Especially because sometimes we don't know what's in the ground. I know here in Southern California we have a problem with the Argentinian ants. The Argentinian ants come and they lay their eggs on the trunk of the plants, and then these eggs have this other little animal that goes on the root of the trees, and they start eating all the nutrients and all the good stuff on the roots of the trees, and this weakens the trees. And sometimes when you have a little wind, your tree could collapse, especially if it has a lot of branches, if it's heavy, if the weight of the tree is unbalanced, it's gonna collapse. Or even like I said, when it rains, the soil is moist and wet, and a little wind can also make your tree collapse. So it's important to pay attention to your trees, because if we don't and they collapse, you're gonna lose a tree. It becomes expensive after to get it clean, or you can have it fall on something. Um, so it's important to also take into consideration, to hire the right person to prune your trees, to make sure that he's aware that there might be a nest there. Um, Try to avoid pruning trees during nesting season. Nesting season is from February to like early September, late August. Make sure that whoever's pruning your tree is aware that there could be a nest there, so we need to be careful with that. Let's see what I have here on the slide. Take into account the large trees on your property. It's important to do annual cleaning and pruning to avoid trees from breaking and causing more damage on your properties. Hire a subcontractor who is qualified and insured to do this job. Use healthy practices such as clean pruning shears, responsible waste disposal, and pruning outside of bird nesting season. I know that sometimes you might not be able to prune outside of pruning season, especially here in Southern California. We need to do brush clearance in May or in June, and that's pretty much during nesting season. And sometimes your property now might pass inspection from the fire department, so you're gonna have to do some pruning on your trees maybe during that time of the year. So it's important to talk to your the company who's doing it for you, or the guy who's doing it for you, to make sure that he's aware that there could be nests there, and we need to be careful with that. So annual pruning of trees, it's important to make sure that the weight on your tree is balanced, so that, like I said, if we have a rain, or if Argentinian ants started messing with your root system, your tree is gonna be okay. Modifications of the fire zone. It is important to clean some areas of the landscape to prevent fires. It is important to do annual modifications of the fire zone, cleaning and trimming according to the local regulations. If you don't maintenance, if you don't take care of your property, the fire department will hire an agency that will come and they will do it for you, and they won't do it. They're not gonna care about your property. They're just gonna go and shop everything off, and not do it like you would. um and because of all the fires that we've been having in California, it's very important to have your properties clean, and to avoid any larger damage in the future. I have been doing property clearance myself for more than 10 years now, and I have noticed a lot of things. For example, I started not using weed whacking in one of the properties where I clean. You know, sometimes you have a lot of vegetation growing off the ground that later on becomes dry and the fire department wants to get rid of it. I noticed that when you use weed whackers, you weed whack all the insects and all the snakes that are in the ground because you're just weed whacking and you're not aware of what's there. And so we started hand picking all the weeds and hand pulling all the stuff that we wanted to get rid of. And I have noticed that there's a lot of insects that are in the ground that when you're not using a weed whacker, you're pretty much leaving them there, um, which is good. Um, so there are a couple practices that we can, but I do understand that that there might be larger properties and people won't have time to do these things manually. But also another thing I noticed that there's a lot of like native vegetation that's coming off the ground that when you weed whack, you pretty much get rid of that too. But when you're aware that there is a native there, you're just gonna pull the dead weeds and the dead non-native vegetations that's there. For example, one of the properties where I work, there's a lot of California native Artemisia growing there. And before, when we were weed whacking, we were just weed whacking everything, and we left it pretty much blank. And now that we're doing this thing manually, it takes us longer time to do, but we're leaving all this vegetation that's good for our animals. One of the things that made me very sad last year was that after we cleaned the property, we pretty much got rid of all the weeds and all that stuff. And there was a deer coming around looking for something to eat. And in the summer, there wasn't anything because all the properties around there, they had pretty much weed whack everything and got rid of their weeds. And I noticed that he was looking for something to eat and there wasn't anything. So what he was munching on was pretty much our native plants. So leaving as much as we can of our natives, it's very important so that there's always going to be someone that's going to come around hungry looking for something to eat. So it's important to take that into consideration. And that's pretty much it for today. It was a short presentation. I don't know if someone has
Yeah, there's a lot of questions.
yes.
Yeah, so let's see. We had a lot of questions about folks for recommendations on sharpening your hand pruners and loppers and what your favorite tools are, or like if you have a specific brand that you like. And also about disinfecting and what solution you like to use when you're keeping hygiene.
Okay, my favorite brand to use is Corona. Um, I have been using Corona all my life. I have bought some other pruners too, but I feel that this is the one that lasts me the longest. Um, and Corona also has these I don't know what you call them, these small little tools that have like a sharpener on one edge, and you pretty much just buy one of those tools and you open up your pruners and you just sharpen it from the inside with this tool. There's tools that you can buy to prune, to sharpen your tools. And hygiene wise, I do not like using bleach. There are some people that use bleach. I personally don't, because I feel that with time, your pruners are gonna start becoming damaged with the chemicals that are on the bleach. So I would prefer using vinegar, or I would prefer, even if you have a torch around, just use a torch to kill all the bacteria on your pruners. Um, Another thing to take into consideration is make sure that after you clean your pruners or your tools, make sure that you dry them up very well. Make sure that before you use them, there aren't any more chemicals on it. to avoid these chemicals going on your plant, because if you have bleach or if you have vinegar, you can burn your plants. But there are multiple things that you can use. Lately, I've been finding a little bit more practical, just having a torch around me and just torching it on the edge and killing all the bacteria.
And do you clean them only between different properties, or between, are there any plants that after particular plants you clean them?
I would recommend, if you don't know, the area where you're working at, if you see a plant that it has like some fungi or bacteria or disease on it, even if you're in the same property, if in that property you just prune something that has a disease, make sure you clean it before you move on to a different plant to avoid passing that disease to the other plants. But if you have been working in an area for a long time and you know that your plants are healthy, um, I I don't do it from one plant to the other unless I know that that plant has something there. That's why it's important to always keep an eye on your garden to make sure you monitor it, to make sure what's there and what's not there, so that when you do these things, you know what you're doing. Definitely make sure that you do clean them when you're cleaning in one property and then you go and clean another property, because you don't want to take something that's in one property to the other. I definitely do that. If I'm working in one house in the morning before I go to the house in another house in the evening, I make sure that my tools are clean. But if I'm working in the house in the morning and I'm pruning a salvia that I know that is healthy, and then I'm gonna go and prune a cyanosas, and I know that cyanosas is healthy, I don't clean it. But if I know that I'm working in the morning in a house and I'm doing a plant that I know that has something, I definitely clean it before I move on to another plant.
Good to know. And for sharpening, I often just take it to the outdoor hardware store. Do you?
You can do that, but also they also sell little tools. Like this same brand Corona makes these little like sharpening tools that are like pencils. On one edge it has some like little rock that you use that side, you open up your shears and then you use that side of that pencil and then you just sharpen it. Like it's not hard, but you can also take it to a hardware store if you want to do that.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions on a couple of those topics. There are a lot of questions on specific kinds of plants and finding them, but one of them is if you do cut something and you've got kind of a site wound, do you use any sealant? Do you?
No, I wouldn't recommend using anything. If you feel that you have made a bad cut, just leave it like that. Don't even try touching it even more, because you're gonna weaken the plant even more. If you see that with time your plant is becoming more weakened and you see that it's not doing well, I would recommend to maybe add a little bit of compost to help the plant get a little bit healthier and stronger. But if you made a bad cutting on a plant, just don't touch it anymore. Let it heal by itself. It will definitely heal by itself. Because if you make more cuttings and you continue to mess with it, you're just gonna weaken it even more and create more problems.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Emerson, can I go into your last slide just so we can see all your contact information?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You are probably going to be very popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions about irrigation systems, pruning, plant ID or planting or soil types, retaining walls, fire prevention practices, or brush clearance, you guys can email me or text me or call me, whatever you guys need. I'm here to help.
We appreciate that. And for everybody listening, you can reach out to Maya and I as well if you have other questions or if you've been watching the whole series. And Emerson obviously knows what he's talking about. You're in front of a bunch of beautiful bunch grasses at the Gottlieb Garden, I believe, behind you. We've had a couple of different questions about pruning bunch grass. I know in my yard they were overpacked. I inherited the landscape and I haven't had time to redo anything with it. So mine end up as little balls. Not great. How do you do yours?
Once the flowers are done, you can definitely go and cut it all the way back. And just where you leave like a little round ball. You can do an excessive pruning on your grasses, and the next year they will come back nicer. It's important to prune those once a year after they flower.
Yeah. Well, we've got a bunch of different ones. Do you have any websites that you recommend that discuss pruning or other maintenance? Have you seen anything you really like?
Well, I use Coscape. I use Las Pilitas to find more information about the plants, or you can just Google the plant name and like use pruning type, and you're gonna have even articles that talk about different things. I don't have a specific one that I use. I just like going online and reading different things, and then I just make sense of it.
Yeah, well, Spilitas and a couple of them have terrific resources. We had somebody ask about you teaching in Spanish.
Yes, the Landscape Certified program. So I help translate the Landscape Certified program at Theodore Payne from English to Spanish, and we actually will start a new session on February 7th. This is going to be the 4th time I'm teaching this course. I don't know if it's too late for you guys to register. I'm not sure, but you guys can definitely contact either Payne or give me an email or call me, and I will talk to them, see maybe if we can add some of you guys if we still have room. But I'm sure that in the summer we will continue with these courses. So if you guys are interested in the future, you guys can also contact me or contact either Payne, and we can definitely add you guys to the roster.
Great. And that's a class that Theodore Payne Foundation is going to be running in Southern California. California Native Plant Society is going to be running it in Northern California, part of supporting the full industry. It's running in English and Spanish. So
yes, I think it's very important. Here in Southern California, most of the gardeners I see, they're Spanish speakers, and I think it's important for us to share our knowledge with them. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't speak English or don't understand English. So translating this stuff to Spanish really helps, because at the end of the day, we want to have a better environment, help our ecosystem, help all our insects, all our animals with our plants. And like I said, conventional gardening is completely different than what we do here with our native plants. So it's important that we're all on the same page, and we all understand the importance of using native plants. So that's why I think it's important what California Native Plant Society and Theodore Payne are doing with these courses.
yeah, it's important knowledge to respect and help to share. Well, we're coming to the end here, and I know we haven't gotten to every question. Please be gentle on Emerson. He could become very popular this evening, we know. But thank you. We appreciate having you all here so very much. And next month, the first Thursday, will be on aromatic plants for your garden. It'll be a Naturehood garden chat, which means there'll be a multi-speaker panel, and they'll give you some interesting and new information. So in the meantime, if you've got questions, all three of us are available to answer you.
Yeah, and we will be sending out a recording of this with resources as well, with links to some of the things that Emerson was discussing. So yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you so much, Emerson, for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all for being here and for supporting native plants. May you have a good garden season. Night, everyone.
Night.
Take care.